gentlemen, excellencies, dear colleagues, in a few minutes we will start the ICLEI WBGU side event. So we'd like to kindly invite you to take your seats so that we can have the order in the room.
Well, yeah, we understand now that the funding is there from the national government, which is it's a huge imposition on a municipality to try to sustain it.
So, good afternoon, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the UN Climate Conference, UN Marrakesh Climate Conference official side event hosted by ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability and German Advisory Council on Global Change. My name is Yunus Arikan. I'm the head of global policy and advocacy at ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability. It's a great pleasure to welcome you in this exciting couple of hours that we could discuss a key discussion. We can touch on a key discussion in this debate on climate action, which is science policy dialogue. We're happy to collaborate with WBGU. Today's session, we will start with Dr. J Schellnhuber. He will first share with us the latest findings of WBGU, and he will refer to the great urban transformation. Then we will hear from Marike van Statten how ICLEI, as the global network of local governments, responding to the climate change in terms of its support to its members and its in collaboration with partners. But after this first introductory presentation, we will have the honor of having Her Excellency Minister of Environment Sweden, Ms. Skog, to address the audience and the panel with her remarks. And this is a great honor for us, because you can imagine how difficult it is to reserve time for the ministers in this first days of the high level. So we are extremely delighted. We will then continue to hear the responses of our leaders from various parts of the world. They will share their experience, how they are working with science and how they are integrating the scientific knowledge to their policy and ambitious action. Of course, every locality has different conditions and perspectives, so we will try to also get this diversity. And we also have the honor to hear the latest progress in climate science in work with the cities. Deborah Roberts, the co-chair of the working group on adaptation, is with us. She has a number of hats. She has been a long-time champion of local governments from a Tekvini municipality, and we are proud. She's also now leading the important work of science and climate change. I don't want to take too much of your time, but just a couple of remarks in this discussion about science and policy. Let's address the importance that climate change has been one of the important processes which is trying to base the policy actions on the scientific data. The establishment between UNEP and World Meteorological Organization to have scientific reports and having the negotiators respond to these realities was a unique approach. But of course, in the first couple of decades, we had the challenge of, we had climate skeptics all around the world. So the urgency and the scale of climate change was not easy to be communicated, was not easy to address. But after so many years of work, Paris Agreement has finally referred to this reality, and hopefully that we will make a collaborative action by all actors and in all countries of the world. At the local level, one interesting point I can address is that we at the local level do not necessarily negotiate science. At most cases, we listen to science and we try to act according to the science. So I think in this new world, there are a lot of things that our leaders can share and we can learn. But of course, with the realities of the world, the one conclusion is that we have to act faster and all together. With this introductory remarks, it's a great pleasure for me to give the floor to Dr. Schellnhuber, and the floor is yours, and I will arrange the slides.
I see. Now it should work. Huh? So let's first overcome the technological obstacles. So, thank you very much. Actually, the German Advisory Council on Global Change, which was created as a body in 1992, on the occasion of the Rio conference. So I'm a physicist by training, I'm a climate scientist, but I'm here at this conference really because we just finished a major report on the future of the urban environment, of urbanization, of migration, all these things. And the title actually is, which is available to you, I mean, everything, you will learn about it later on. The title of that report is actually Humanity on the Move, really. So it's not only that you move from the urban hinterland into the city, you move from nation to nation and so on. And the cities are now becoming, I would say, the ultimate battlefield where it will be decided whether we will win on global warming or not. So let me sort of talk you through a few slides, and I'll start really with the climate science background. And we have a co-chair of the IPCC here. And this is a conference of the parties under the framework convention. So that makes a lot of sense. Let me see whether it works. Yes, so you have all seen this, of course, and some of you have been to Paris, including myself. And job done, on the lower left-hand corner, you see well below 2 degrees. Now, why on earth 2 degrees? I think even people who have been to Paris have not completely figured out why the hell we have decided on well below 2 degrees. I give you the answer now. So a long time ago, I started to introduce into the scientific debate this notion of tipping points and tipping elements in the Earth system. I was not the only one, of course. And the idea is when you heat up the planet, will this be a gradual response process? So crops will have fewer yields, for example, less yield, things like that. People will suffer more. Or will it be a highly nonlinear process? The response will be, maybe, that you push certain vital subsystems of the planetary machinery into a completely different mode of operation. When we talk, as you can see here, the great ice sheets, yes, they can be molten down, but how will it happen? Gradually, or will there be a tipping point and when there's actually a point of no return crossed? So the Greenland ice sheet, if you start to melt it down, when maybe in 50 years, the point of no return has been reached already. So this is highly exciting scientific stuff on the one hand, but it's also very important for the future of our civilization. So here you see this almost iconic map now on the various tipping elements. So you have the great ecosystem on Earth, like the Great Barrier Reef, the Amazon rainforest. You have the currents, like the thermaline circulation, the jet stream in the atmosphere, ocean system, and you have the great ice sheets. So I'll give you now what the science knows today about when will we cross the tipping points, which are alluded to in this slide. And this has been published in Nature Climate Change just a few months ago. And this picture gives you the full story, if you like. So I'll talk you through. It has several elements, but it's not too complicated and it can be even understood. So the wiggly line starting from minus 20,000, that's during the last ice age, is the global mean temperature anomaly. So you see, compared to pre-industrial, the last ice age was maximally 4 degrees cooler. When we reached around 12,000 years ago the Holocene, so the climate became very stable. And then on the right-hand side, you see various options for the future. So the green one is, yes, we go completely sustainable in the next few decades. And then there will be a rise in temperature, maybe 1.5 to 2 degrees actually. And then the whole system will stabilize at 1 degree above pre-industrial, 1 degree. That is something we can probably absorb and adapt to. But currently we are on the red path, that means the RCP 8.5, and that will take us by the year 2500, because global warming will not stop by the end of the century. It will go on and on through the feedbacks. It will bring us to 8 degrees warming, 8 degrees above pre-industrial. And now you see the Paris range, the gray bar, horizontal bar, 1.5 to 2 degrees. That's the landing strip for our planet, which was decided during COP21. And finally, you see arrow bars here. They are affiliated with the various tipping elements. So WISE means West Antarctic ice sheet, you have the Greenland ice sheet, you have the coral reefs. And you see, first of all, a lot of uncertainty here, which is fairly narrow, by the way, for the coral reefs. We are pretty sure that the coral reefs, 90% of them, will perish with just 1.5 degrees warming. So 1.5 degrees target makes a lot of sense. Greenland, we are not so sure, but probably around 2 degrees, irreversible meltdown can happen already. And you see now 2 things. It would be absolutely foolish to go beyond the Paris range, because when all the other tipping elements would kick in. But even if we hold the Paris line, we are already in the high-risk zone. So we need not only full action according to Paris, we need a damn lot of luck in order to avoid this major accident. So that's the situation right now. And actually, in order to hold the 2 degrees line, the emissions curve has to look like this. You know, we have the historical anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions starting in 1950, some 8 billion tons, surging to 40 billions now. And the blue line is what is necessary in order to hold the 2 degrees. So it is complete phasing out of emissions by 2050, not somewhere in the second half of the century, no, by 2050, and then probably going negative. And this involves, here we say Herculean steps, this involves, for example, precisely how we build, how we run, how we supply cities of the world. I'll just take you back now 6,000 years. The rise and fall of the great world city, I hope this animation works, will show you how the acceleration of urbanization happens over the last 50 years. So let's start. A few blobs, Uruk, for example, in Mesopotamia, the first cities emerged and perished again, by the way. And when you see again in Mesopotamia, Ur, nothing, nowhere else actually. Now Indian cities come onto the map. And you see how it develops, so still confined to a very small region in the world. So we are reaching the 2nd millennium before Christ here. And now China is on the map. And the Mediterranean culture, Crete and so on, is emerging, but still confined to the old world. But now you saw it, a blip across the Atlantic. So you had the Latin American, or actually not Latin American, the Indian cultures here. And now we accelerate. The Roman Empire, London appears, and so on, southern tip of India. And we're going slowly towards the medieval climate optimum, actually, that is around 1,000 to 1,200. So you see how the world is building cities and cities. Now we are within the medieval. You have probably seen Copenhagen. When there will be a sort of short slowing down of urbanization, and still it's the old world, but now the Industrial Revolution comes along. And now you see it emerging like this. It's an explosion, really, that is happening. And this is the urban world today. So I could talk for hours about this animation, but I do not have the time. But it gives you a sense of the drama that is unfolding out before our very eyes, really. And this is just the beginning, because Now, more than the majority, more than 50% of the world's population live in cities. Until 2050, it will be at least 70%. In England, in the 19th century, 80% of the people first lived in the rural areas, 20% in the city. Within a century, the ratio was completely conversed. And I'm sure that will happen on the planetary scale now. And you see 70% of the global emissions arise from cities. And if now the cities will take most of the world population, it will be 90%. So it is the cities where the battle is won or lost. And cities are highly vulnerable. The trends actually of urbanization go precisely against the grain and any rationality of climate change, because people go to the coastlines, they creep up the hills, and they go to the desert areas. So lack of water, lack of shelter, and sea level rise. But that's the trend. The global mega trend is going precisely against any climate wisdom. And as a side effect of coal-fired power stations and so on, you have tremendous air pollution. I mean, New Delhi is probably now the most air-polluted city on Earth. And you can measure it, of course. And so all in all, probably 7 million people die from air pollution every year. That's a massacre, really. In China, 1 million alone, outdoor air pollution. So what can you do? Well, the scientists scratch their head and bring together the elite of our community, Nobel laureates. We had this meeting last year in Hong Kong. So that was, I think, quite an important event. And we said, you need a new urban agenda indeed. And this was in a way prompting also what we did for the German government. Now here is a very, very simple analysis of what we are up to. So the archetypes of the urban challenges within this century are the following. So you have on the one hand, the mature cities, like Copenhagen, Stockholm, and so on. They are not green enough. You can do a lot with them. So that's the first job. The second job is new settlements. You know very well that half of the carbon budget left for holding the 2 degrees line would be consumed already by building those planned cities the old-fashioned way with concrete and steel and glass. Half of it would be eaten up already. So it's in the planning. And a third one, constantly overlooked actually, and not really taken into account, is the informal dwellings, the universe of slums, informal cities built by necessity, by need, by poverty, by corruption, what have you. And for all of them, we need solutions. And maybe the answer to the 2 billion people who will live in informal settlements by the middle of this century is to the architects. Forget about the ideal cities. Try to bring about the functional slum. And a functional slum architecture may be the swimming school. There are completely different schemes now being planned. Jakarta, you have probably heard about this Garuda Titanic seawall, which in the end will benefit the rich, maybe protect the poor. Nobody knows whether it will ever come true, but I'm sure we can build swimming schools. And there is something which is really interesting. I just learned about a startup called Voodoo, but Voodoo with a W. You know, in my view, the construction material of the future is wood. It's not concrete. Concrete is killing the climate. Wood can help to store a lot of carbon. And these guys, actually, it was originally launched at Harvard University. They create translucent wood, which is fireproof and everything. It could be one of the disruptive innovations we need in this century. And you know, there are many of these crazy guys out there, hundreds of startups who are trying to do that. So we have to think in these terms. So finally, the German Advisory Council also was pointing, we have the full analysis of all these problems, but we also tried to come up with a narrative. Those of you who may have attended Quito, the Habitat Free, know there was not really a narrative there. We came up with the narrative that we think actually the only way to absorb 10 billion people in a sustainable way giving them participation in the urban space would be a polycentric vision. And this is just to remind everybody, as you have seen on my animation, Mesopotamia, the states, the urban states, the city-states of the Greek polis, of course, the Renaissance in northern Italy, even in Germany during the Enlightenment, these were all polycentric structures. So the only answer given currently is compactify the city, but maybe not the right way to win the climate battle in the end. So here is the report. It will be handed out. It's available on a stick. You can download it freely from the website. Highly recommend it to you. Everybody told us it's just the best in the world. So take notice of it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Schellnhuber. It was a striking journey in time back to the history, but also a frightening future and the realities of today. So, of course, it's not in a daily life in the city, probably we're not discussing such holistic approaches, but because day to day the cities are trying to preserve services and it is also an interesting challenge. So that's one of the reasons why the cities are also set up their network so that they can help each other to understand and solve these complex issues in a collaborative way. So in that sense, Mareike, can you also tell us, take the journey of ICLEI in how we are trying to translate this complexity in our global and our localities? So I'll open, you can start.
Thank you very much, Yunus. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's lovely to see a power-packed room listening from politics. Formed as cities, as towns, as rural areas by science. Science needs to help us make informed decisions. And I would like to talk to you about this. How would we facilitate the response of local and subnational governments in advancing the Paris Agreement? We have sets of governments that are not part of the negotiation formally, that are increasingly being called on to act and to lead in this climate world. World of climate change, and we wish to just give you a snapshot. I do not have as many pretty pictures or a nice story to tell because I'm talking about the future. So imagine the pictures in your image, in your mind. Very briefly, for those of you who do not know ICLEI, we are a city network, a global city network with more than 1,100 cities, towns, and regions in over 100 countries working actively with us on the path to a sustainable future. Some are just starting and some are real leaders, and they are sharing their vision and their support. Now, if we focus on local climate action, we know we need to connect the key issues. I think already Professor Schellnhuber has referred to this. SDGs, we need to connect climate change, the new urban agenda, and the SDGs. And this can easily happen at the local level because this is where you want to see action and you want to see benefits and results. We wish to address, unfold, and accelerate at the local level, and ICLEI's role particularly is to give support to local governments, give them capacity, build their capacity, and enable and support leadership. We work through communities of practice and facilitated peer exchange. Our bigger cities like to work with each other. Our smaller cities like to work with each other. A city that is advanced on biodiversity and interested in climate action can learn from another that has already done this. We also know we need to work through multi-level, multi-scale partnerships and initiatives, and that is very much at the heart of ICLEI's approach towards its partners. The policy frameworks I already mentioned. Last point, but not least on this particular point of acceleration is finance. We see and we've heard that there is finance, but it's not accessible by the local government level in many cases. So we need to find ways to unlock finance mechanisms, but also find and shape new ones that can help us scale and accelerate. Now, why do mayors, councillors, and their councils act? They want to see benefits for the community. So this has to be a win-win for the community, for the nation, but also for the world. This takes me immediately to levels of government. Vertical integration is a topic you will hear more and more about. We need to see better communication and coordination between different levels of government. And ICLEI calls for an approach that is not a top-down approach. Top-down, we see, does not always work. We need to hear each other. We need to, as different levels of government, need to listen to each other. So we need to shape a new universe in which we can have a platform for fruitful exchange as government levels speaking to each other as peers. And there create a strong framework for action. And together we can pull forces, work with the business community, work with civil society. Again, a partnership effort is needed to scale and speed up. Local governments, we highly recommend them to focus on integrated approaches. Don't just look at mitigation or low emission development. Look at an integrated approach where you bring climate together, adaptation, resilience, mitigation, and sustainable development, because this will bring the win-win-win. Now, again, still linked to that national government level, MRV, measurable, reportable, verifiable. We need to be able to track where we are going and to see if we are on track for that 1.2 degrees, let's go for 1.2 degrees target. It would even be better. But MRV is not just a national element. It is indeed for local and subnational governments. So they can and should be more effectively measuring and reporting publicly, voluntarily, what they're doing, and get that verification system in place. This is not just about mitigation, but also tracking what is happening on the adaptation and resilience side. I wish to give a snapshot, and this is really a tiny view of what we offer our local and subnational governments, but it focuses on giving them the right information, including science and policy information, helping them to raise awareness as local leaders, but also information they can use in their societies to move and scale. There's guidance, tools available, standards and protocols. It's there, it's ready for your use. I come at this slightly, well, essentially from two angles. Low carbon city and ICLEI's resilient city. We have two city agendas that directly tackle climate change, and we have several others that also include and must respond to climate change, looking at biodiversity, our economy, and so on. But if you look at these four cornerstones, raising awareness, giving guidance and tools, making sure there are standards and reporting opportunities available, and coalitions and support that unfold to assist our cities, towns, and regions around the world. That is what ICLEI is all about. That's the little snapshot. I'm not going to go into details of every single one of these, but I would like to look at the basic clusters. We give process guidance. How do you tackle climate change? Looking at it from a process perspective to embed and infuse your political structures, your municipal systems, making sure you tackle climate change within every single municipal department, that all your staff know what this is about, not just the people working on energy, but also your communication staff, not just the people tackling the transportation system, but also the guys dealing with waste and water and infrastructure. Again, that needs to be embedded in the whole governmental structure, if you will. Some of the tools, there are fantastic tools there for greenhouse gas emissions inventories that can be conducted using free available tools that you can either use online or download, following particular protocols so that we can actually compare emissions to emissions, apples to apples, if you will. Thematically, we look at clean air. You saw the picture of New Delhi. That is scary, people, and many cities are looking like this. So we need to tackle climate and clean air, climate and waste, climate and buildings. And in these initiatives in which ICLEI is a partner, such as the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, such as the District Energy in Cities initiative, this is where policy advice is given, technical advice is given, and partnerships are being created. We have seen a growth in reporting, voluntary reporting by local and subnational governments. And we have a fantastic report. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy with me, but you will find some outside. Is our latest Carbon Climate Registry New Digest, where we have more than 700 cities, towns, and regions reporting. This is a small number, and yet we capture amazing information, which will help us analyze and see and detect trends. And there we would like to interact also with the scientists, with the academia to see, are we missing elements? Can we think of new ways of moving forward? I wish to give a quick snapshot. This is in the report. But in this, you see, we represent, through the reporting entities, we call them, already more than 660 million citizens, whom we could also, in theory, include and involve in the activities that they also change behavior, work with their local governments, work with their national governments. This is where we wish to go. But we wish to see the number represented through reporting to be 100% of the global population. That is the direction. I wish to end with a highlight, which I think is something that also raises, in my personal view, some measure of optimism. We are seeing cities and regions already setting targets towards 2050. Many national governments do not even address this perspective. Most of these targets do focus on greenhouse gas emission reduction, which is for the whole community. That's exactly what we wish to see. But they're also looking then, some of those do not necessarily commit at that level, but would commit to a 100% renewable target. And these are the leaders in the world. So watch that space, because this number is going to grow dramatically. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marike. Before we go to the leaders of our members, how these discussions translate in your cities, we would like to invite Minister Skog in giving us the guidance about how in this context, both the extremes of frightening future, but also the hope can be an opportunity for the Paris Agreement. Because yesterday when Minister Hakima was describing the COP of Marrakesh, she was saying that this is the first COP in building a new civilization. And that's why we are so excited. Minister Skog, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for your, once again, availability.
Thank you very much. Is this on? Yes. For the invitation and possibility to talk at this very important issue. I have a portfolio that I'm so happy and delighted to be able to work on. I am the Minister for the Environment, for Urban Development. And creating this portfolio says something about which role we are from the government convinced that the cities will play in the work towards a more sustainable future. We are convinced that the answers lies on the city level. But of course, combating climate change will require coordinated effect work on all levels on society, from global to the local. It requires a mobilization of all the society. But in the history that we so clearly was pointed out of urbanization, how cities are planned and developed, how housing, urban mobility, traffic, public transport are coordinated, are crucial on how we could create a healthy environment, sustainable growth, good quality of life for citizens, and reduced emissions of greenhouse gases. And looking on cities, we know very much on what a livable city is. And in that answer, we also find some really good solutions for in the climate work. For example, we know how density is important to be able to create sustainable transportation, walkability and bikeability. But we also have to be strong enough and have the political power enough to, from that, dare to question the role that the cars are playing in our cities. Cars cannot dominate a sustainable city. It just won't happen. And to get a perspective as well, cities for 3.5 billion people are likely to be built in the next 35 years. And this is a huge challenge, but also an opportunity. If we can steer all the investment this means towards a low carbon and a sustainable solutions. And from the national level and government, we can and we must support the local level and the regions in their work. And here I would like to point out clear goals, policies and measures are very important to steer these investment in a sustainable way. From the Swedish government, we want to send a very clear signal, and we have pointed out that our current goal is that by 2020 we will have reduced emissions by 40%, and we will do that. It won't even be hard. But a parliamentary committee that have supported in 80% from our parliament have proposed that Sweden should have no net emissions by 2045. That would be more difficult, but it's doable. We have also claimed from our government that we will be one of the first fossil-free welfare states in the world. And of course, there's a point of us not saying the fossil-free state, but a fossil-free welfare state, meaning that we see no contradiction between welfare and climate work. Wisely done. Our climate, the transition that we're about to do in our climate work will be the core of our future welfare and our stable economy. In Sweden, we have a long experience in working with local climate investments programs in order to stimulate concrete projects on the local level. And we know that this is an efficient way to work, both in terms of carbon economy, but also in the economy overall. And we have, from this government, a strong investment program. We also have special grants in order to support sustainable planning and investment in public transport. And I have a strong belief that investment programs, grants and premiums can be an important way to support the transition to a low-carbon society at the local and the regional level. However, it is important that these grants are geared towards projects that have a transformative effect on our cities and on our economy, and by lowering the costs for new technology, and thus, in longer run, lead to even more investments by authorities as well as the private sector. And in finding these investments, academia plays a crucial role, and we need to have a close collaboration. And to set this collaboration, we have launched an innovation partnership program in Sweden, stimulating new innovative transport and mobility solutions, smarter cities. And we have also launched a forum where we invite municipalities, regions, businesses, and civil society and how in this work and how we should become the first fossil-free welfare nation. And the interest from specifically the business side is enormous. But we also see some very strong work and strong initiative from the local level. And on this COP, we talk about and we look strongly to the local level. And as representing a national level, maybe I should keep on saying that the national leaders are the most important. I do hope that many of us will take responsibility and making the Paris Agreement real. But I do, and I'm quite sincere in this, also hope for the leadership that we see on the local level to be robust enough to take us further, even when some national levels might fail their responsibilities. But I believe that the momentum on the local level, on the business sides, and in other parts of the societies are strong enough to survive even the political turbulence that we do see. But to get this, we need to work together to capitalize on this, the current momentum that we see for concrete action that the Paris Agreement and the Global Climate Action Agenda has created. We also need to find new ways to cooperate on all levels of society to create efficient way to direct investments towards zero carbon and a sustainable future for us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Minister. As the one of the most progressive countries in the world, it's really great motivation for us to hear this inspirational messaging, so that we should not lose our hope by hearing some dark stories around the world, because there are good stories as well. And it's not a coincidence that you hear from a national government representative, because there's a history. And if you allow me, I also would like to congratulate you of your political career that we in Copenhagen in 2009, we were together with you as the deputy mayor of Malmö. So you can see how the power of local governments and local thinking, if they connect to the power of national authorities, how spread that could create, and then it can go to the global level through international partnerships. And in that spirit, we would be continuing the collaboration with the Swedish government, of course. We look forward to your support to the climate action. Especially, we have been excited because that is one of the inclusiveness and ambitious innovation of Paris Agreement. So we will be hoping that you will convince the rest of your governments and join this collaboration. We would continue to discuss the exciting debate with our local and subnational leaders, but we know you are tight with the time. So whenever you feel that you are now stressed to the other agendas, feel free, and we will keep up information about the outcome of the discussion. But now I would like to turn to the floor to another exciting country and local reality that we are proud to share with you, in the sense that maybe the more you get closer to the polls, maybe the more you get more ambitious in terms of climate action, so that you are facing the reality of climate change. We have the honor of having Don Iverson from Edmonton, Canada, as one of the long-lasting members of ICLEI, one of the most active members of ICLEI, proud leader of the Partnership for Climate Protection with Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Mayor Iverson, you have heard the realities, and we know that you are conscious, and your city staff. So if you can give us, as you have seen from the examples of political in a national context, that climate action is not too far away, it is not a dream. How you were able to achieve your success in terms of the value of working through data and connection to science, that did help this in that your political decisions. So maybe we can start the debate in that perspective.
Well, thank you very much. And Canada's back, our Prime Minister is fond of saying, and so much so that local government is part of the Canadian delegation. So I get a pink tag, which is great. I'm here partly because I'm the mayor of Edmonton, but also because I chair the Big City Mayors Group of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, longtime partners with ICLEI, with the Partners for Climate Protection, as you mentioned. And Edmonton was one of the founding cities with ICLEI more than 20 years ago. And so we've been connected to this science since before people were talking about it. And we have the advantage of also being a university town, a great learning and research center for Western Canada. And we therefore have the benefit of having experts who are unencumbered, who have academic freedom and have been talking about these issues for certainly more than a decade in the public discourse. And the city of Edmonton has worked with those experts and worked with the global network through ICLEI and through other organizations to try to bring the conversation about climate change to our citizens. And we play an important role as policymakers and in particular as politicians to translate the science, which is both complex and sometimes depressing, into a message that is palatable to our public, who have many other concerns. And we still have to, I was joking with Mr. Ching-Fu here, that we also have to collect the garbage at the same time. We still have to run our municipalities so we have the confidence of our people to bring things to them. But because partly at the local level in Canada, we don't have political parties in the municipal political context, there's a little bit less partisan rancor. And we talked a lot about this in the previous session, but I think that's also allowed most cities to take membership. There are 10 large Canadian cities that are members of the Compact of Mayors, soon to be the Covenant. And so that leadership example has been strong. The example I want to share with you that I think was really transformational for us was something that we did, a partnership with the University of Alberta, which is in Edmonton, on a project called the Alberta Climate Dialogue. And so this was actually a civil society participatory democracy project to take a citizen panel of 60 Edmontonians from every walk of life, with every perspective you could imagine about energy and about climate and the economy and philosophy and how our hockey team is doing and everything else that you'd find in a diverse group of citizens, and put them in a room together for 6 consecutive sessions and they were full-day sessions on consecutive weeks, and deciphered some of the science by having local and international experts come in and present and answer questions and help try to translate the science into terms that lay people could understand. And the advantage of this exercise was that at the end of it, unencumbered by normal politics, this group of 60 Edmontonians, who were quite divided on the question of climate and the question of energy transition at the beginning, didn't achieve consensus about whether climate change was caused by anthropogenic carbon or other sources, but they did come to a consensus that energy transition was desirable from a risk management point of view. And so they were able to find a consensus that transcended a dispute about the science. And this is very, very important, because when this was reported back to our city council, there was no reason, even given the divergence among my councillors, there was no reason for us not to adopt a much more aggressive energy and climate transition process, because when we had not just a random selection of Edmontonians and their initial views, but when we actually took a representative sample of Edmontonians, gave them the facts, allowed them to ask questions, and then develop a consensus, that consensus was powerfully strong. And a number of the people who doubted that anthropogenic carbon was the cause for climate came to believe it, or were reasonably persuaded by the end of the process. So the exercise has been documented and reported on as an academic study, and I encourage you to look it up as a best practice for citizen engagement, because the results of it were very, very empowering to our council and to our city administration to say, no, everyday people, given the right facts, given an opportunity to digest the science, will come to the same conclusion that all of us who have the privilege of coming to something like COP or an ICLEI World Congress have naturally come to, which is we urgently need to take action and we need to make transition a priority. And so I think there are different tactics for converting the science into a political consensus, but ensuring that the public is connected to that in a representative way was really, really powerful in building our consensus to take strong policy leadership. And then our energy and climate transition strategy pulls directly from a number of the very ambitious recommendations that were made by this citizen panel. So it's an example of participatory democracy and democratizing the challenge out to the people who will ultimately be affected by it.
Thank you very much. I think that was an excellent example of how locally we would like to challenge. It is one of the key words to achieve progress. And it's, in that sense, progressive politicians, as you have seen in this case, put a goal, challenge the society, but get the support from all actors and use science as a vehicle to open the doors and then bring back the political message down to the earth to implement, so that the investments can be much more owned by the citizens. I think in that sense, that was a good example. So the next, we'll go to another part of the world. We will cross overseas. We will go one of those fastest growing cities. In a couple of decades ago, it was as a rural city, but now being the hub of a number of interesting investments. But also at the same time, another example of, if you believe in change, as you have seen in this chart that Dr. Schellnhuber has seen, if the negative, let's say, development is so fast, this gives us the hope that the positive development can also be so fast. So Kaohsiung is one of those first cities in Asia who had followed the global protocol. It has been one of the first cities who had been compliant and signatory to Compact of Mayors. And now they would like to show the world that it is the third city in the world who would challenge an interesting car-free zone practice under eco-mobility. As the Minister has said, this is one of the key these issues of our world. And Kaohsiung is the third city of ICLEI membership who would try this. And maybe we can listen from Dr. Ching Fu why they decided to go in this kind of ambitious track when nobody forced them, how they had been this kind of bringing the progressive actions to their cities, and how they want to lead the world in the next steps as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. I am Jing Fu Chen, the Director General. I have to. Yep, I'm the Director General of Transportation Bureau, Kaohsiung City Government, Taiwan. It's my great honor to be here to learn and exchange ideas with you. It's also my great pleasure to take this opportunity to share you the information of Eco Mobility World Festival 2017 that is going to take place in my city, Kaohsiung City. Following the first festival in Suwon, South Korea, Joburg in South Africa in 2015. Kaohsiung working in close collaboration with ICLEI to host the third Eco Mobility World Festival. We hope to promote the eco mobility lifestyle in the urban mobility context. To bring the concept of eco mobility into daily life reality, the festival will experiment the eco-mobility practices at one neighborhood in our city, Kaohsiung, during 1 month. It expects not only to arise the awareness of the importance of eco-mobility concept, but also bring the behavior change of local residents to live in an eco-mobility way. Maybe you have or have not been aware, Kaohsiung is an important major harbor city in Taiwan and plays a crucial role in bringing up the great economic growth of Taiwan in the past. Alongside the economic growth, however, Kaohsiung also inevitably accommodate main petrol industries and the heavy manufacturing companies. This results in huge negative environmental impacts, such as air pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, and carbon dioxide emissions in the city, as well as in serious transport and mobility problems, such as congestion, carbon dioxide emissions, and traffic safety issues. Since residents highly rely on private cars and the motorcycle in their daily life mobility. Over the past few years, Kaohsiung City has been committed to mitigate the environmental impacts and endeavors to turn this city into a low-carbon, sustainable, livable city. Specifically, Kaohsiung has adopted the eco-mobility approach to transfer the car-motorcycle-centered city into a people-centered mobility lifestyle. Some practices include improving the pedestrian environment in the city, upgrading and promoting public transport services and the systems, introducing public bike sharing system, investing cycling facility and environment, and also providing subsidy to citizens for replacing the petrol fuel cars and the motorcycle into electric ones. However, we well understand this practice is not enough without resident engagement and political will and also behavior change. Hosting the festival next year is very important for Kaohsiung City, since through the 1 month festival, we aim to experiment whether our residents can cope up with the eco-mobility lifestyle and further reach their behavior change. Currently, we still encounter a lot of opposition and misunderstanding from the local resident, to be honest. We recognize the difficulty of behavior change. And we determined to carry out the eco-mobility concept in our city by keeping on discussion and communicating with the residents for acceptable eco-mobility solutions. Happily, recently we have made some big progresses with the local residents. We are getting more confidence in come up with a successful eco-mobility World Festival next October. Of course, this festival deserves your attendance and personal experience at the time. We look forward to share you our success story about the transformation process of the festival, the neighborhood, and also our city, Kaohsiung. Finally, on behalf of the Kaohsiung City Government, I would like to extend my sincere invitation to you, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, for attending the festival. So please save the day from 1st to 5th of October 2017. And we welcome you in Kaohsiung, Taiwan. Thank you very much. 谢谢.
I think this was another excellent example that we as progressive local governments worldwide are going beyond just curing the troubles by end-of-pipe solutions, but really introducing social, economical, and innovative challenges. And starting from one-day car-free in the street, going to a district, and then going to a whole city, that we can imagine and create cities without private vehicles or non-motorized cities that are environmentally safe transport models. And this is not a dream, this can be a reality, and it can only be done once you start trying. And therefore, Dr. Chingfu has, Mr. Chingfu has mentioned the challenges. Let me give you the example. When Suwon in Korea started this, there was huge protests. One year later, there was the elections, and the elections was, of course, for every politician, a challenge. And it was not an easy decision when he started this initiative, but 1 year later, when the elections were over, he was having the reconfirmation of his political career, because of that he could convince his citizens that change is not easy, but once you get the threshold, you can enjoy. So this transformation from individual citizens worldwide, and the urgency of action that science has created, and the transformative agenda that we have in the Paris Agreement. Deborah, how can we scale up? How can we expand that from one city to another, but all cities in the world? And what will be the role of both the climate community globally and the scientific community? How can they open us new opportunities so that we can shortcut the learning curve, and we can make sure that these information can be reachable to all politicians, and it can be demanded by every citizen. So Deborah, please guide us, your experience in the last couple of years in changing the mindset of the global scientific community that urbanization is a huge issue, but also is a huge opportunity, and what we can expect in the next couple of years.
Thanks, Eunice, and good afternoon to everyone. I hope you're still awake after lunch. I sit here with two hats on. So as I've moved as an IPCC co-chair, but in my day job, I'm actually a local government. And so a lot of what I've heard today really strikes me, because I think in terms of the inputs of this panel, we've literally heard the entire urban. I'd like to start off by congratulating John, because what he did in his presentation is really identified cities as creatures of geography. They're not theoretical places. They don't appear on graphs. They appear on maps. And they change local geographies. And I think John's input was very timely in the sense that He showed that cities are places that have changed the spaces around them, as we saw that urban evolution occurring through time. If we think about what cities did way back 5,000 years ago, they pulled people together and provided an opportunity for transformation. Writing was invented in cities. Commerce was invented in cities. And that process of transformation, by definition, then transformed the city. Once you had writing and trade, you had goods that other people wanted, so you had to build a wall. And we here exist in a city itself, which has an old wall to keep out the invaders. But as commerce and governance and the ability to transform information through that writing increased, so cities evolved, and we began to be concerned about quality of life. And so we shed the walls, and people like Ian McHarg spoke about nature in the city. We were concerned about quality of life and changing the patterns and flows of cities so that they could be walkable, livable, unpolluted spaces. And so cities through their entire history have been a process not only of geographical transformation, but social transformation. What we've seen in the last century, though, is that those localized processes of transformation have really generated an interest among cities in sharing those experiences, because each of those geographies have gone through a different form of transformation. And here I really must commend ICLEI, because they were at the starting block long before many of the existing city networks you see before. They saw well ahead of the game the importance of taking that energy and that innovation at the local government level and networking it so that those local stories of transformation, those changed geographies around the world, could talk together, could learn from each other, so that we could speed up that process of transformation by sharing those good ideas. And I think, you know, we've heard from Edmonton and Kaohsiung, both cities I've been very privileged to visit myself. That ongoing transformation is still happening, but cities are not only content to transform themselves, they want to take those lessons and help others transform at the same kind of rate. And that speaks us to a new geography for cities. And John hinted at that. We've moved cities from a local geography to an international geography. Now, if we're going to really help cities with this very strong transformative agenda that they've driven for 6,000 years, so we've all been at it a very long time, we're going to have to change the scale of support. And I think this is what we're hearing. We're going to have vertical integration. We're going to have to see national governments supporting local governments. We're going to have to see direct access to technology and finance to help cities complete this transformative agenda. One thing that's been potentially missing, though, in this transformative equation is the role of science. This is ironic because in many ways science was born in cities, not dissimilar to the one we're sitting in a very long time ago, but science has not really embraced cities as a global organism, as a global point of transformation. And already scientists are talking about this concept of the Anthropocene, that we've already changed the Earth's system to the extent that we're going to name a geological period after ourselves, so that we're going to leave evidence in the geological record of being here. And let me tell you, that evidence is going to come in the form of our cities. So the question is, if we're going to harness this transformative capacity, our science needs to scale up. Who, obviously from a climate change point of view, is the biggest kid on the block when it comes to climate change assessment? Of course, it's my secondary title, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And that organization, as the international body responsible for assessing global climate science, is beginning to realize that it also needs to change the geography of its focus. So what we're seeing in this sixth assessment cycle is a very strong recognition of the fact that just as cities are becoming globally networked through organizations such as ICLEI, who want to globally share their ideas and help transform, that the science similarly has to operate at that level for cities. So the IPCC in this sixth assessment cycle has very strongly acknowledged cities as an important geography that it needs to focus its assessment process on. And John, I think, will be delighted to absorb your report into that particular process. The There's been a commitment from the IPCC to focus very strongly on cities in all of the products of the 6 assessment cycles. So the main assessment cycle, where we'll look at the physical science, adaptation, and mitigation, and in our 3 special reports. The 1.5 report everyone will know because it's the basis for the facilitated dialogue in 2018 that strongly references cities already. Report coming on oceans and cryosphere. Again, John, the importance of coastal cities, we hope will emerge in that scoping process. Land use, obviously cities are key drivers of land use change in that regard. And importantly for all of us in this room who are interested in cities, the IPCC has committed to a special report on cities in the 7th assessment cycle. And in order to lay the groundwork for that important science, which is going to be part of this massive global transformation that we're all driving through our cities, we need to establish a new global research framework for that. And so we're convening in partnership with ICLEI and other city networks around the world in March 2018, a specific conference focused on cities and climate change science. And we launched the call for a host city for that conference here, in fact, at COP22, where we will begin to put together that research agenda so that all of this good work that you've heard, the science that John is doing, the local actions that we've heard from our 2 cities, Kaohsiung and Edmonton, can be tied together. We can understand what we know, where the gaps are. We can rally resources to fill those gaps in science so that we can bring science into this important global transformation equation. So literally today, all these inputs have already told you a story that's 6,000 years old. But this is probably the most important era for cities because before we only transformed our local geography. Every one of you in this room now is literally an earth changer because through the decisions you take in your cities, empowered by good, reliable science, are going to determine the future of the world. So probably one of the most important discussions that have happened under these particularly prefabricated roofs over the last couple of days. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Deborah. It has always been a great pleasure to walk through this journey with your leadership and the city of Durban. Another great example of how we had brought science and policy when the post-Copenhagen nightmares were all around the world. The cities did not give up. We continued with our efforts that, yes, we will continue whatever happens, and we will give the hope to the nations that when we cities come together, the nations can come together. Mexico City was the first step in 2010, and when we go to Durban, the COP, we had been fantastically hosted by City of Durban, and we had adopted the Durban Adaptation Charter, opening the doors, and there was a great scientific community who have guided all these politicians, and these are all the building blocks of our achievements today. And this gives us one of the reasons why we are here, that it is not just all of our leaders are fantastically happy to travel around the world. Just on the contrary, whenever they go home, they're questioned by their citizens. But in fact, we are aware that once we bring this positive momentum to the global processes, we will benefit, and the national decisions, international decisions will also help our ways to open our resources, to open our barriers, open up our barriers, so that the transformation that is needed much faster than the destruction that we have seen in the last couple of centuries could be easily implemented. So we have around 15 minutes of time for additional dialogue, this time not through the podium, but together with the participants, which I'd like to thank you very much for your interest. I can see the eyes, and there are some of you who are even trying to record and then note. That's fantastic to hear and see, observe, but you have the opportunity to raise your points and note directly to the speakers, panelists, and then we can continue this inspirational dialogue. I think we have microphones, yes. So unfortunately, we don't have translation in this event. So I would like to kindly ask you to bear with the English in terms of speech, and please introduce yourself. If you can try to specify who would like to address the question, and try to make a brief introduction in that sense in terms of your speech. Anybody who wants to take the first floor? Please, we have a gentleman. Can I see any other hands if there is, so that we can collect a couple of, and then we can have a round of response? Okay, second one is there, good. And then we see.
Well, first of all, congratulations to those great presentations. They were very enlightening. My name is Urs Ruth. I'm with Bosch in Germany. And I would like to ask to the panel, maybe to Deborah Roberts, well, when you look at how people produce CO2 at the footprint of people, maybe roughly speaking, 1/3 may be connected to transportation, 1/3 may be connected to emissions from buildings, and 1/3 of a nation may be connected to industry. And now, which of those pieces would cities be able to address most effectively, and which ones would be most difficult for cities to address? Maybe with some examples.
Thank you. Can I have the second lady, the second question from the lady?
Hello, my name is Sunyang Yoon. I'm representing the Women's Environment and Development Organization here, WeDo. We are helping to organize the women's constituency. One of the things which we face as a challenge is to have this participation by the feminist and women's movement into the climate change movement. It is a great challenge. I think the exercise which Mr. Iversen described for Edmonton is something that we can learn from, but there really is a very wide gap between the understanding of science and the issues that the feminist and women's movement care about, which are things like sexual and reproductive health rights and violence. So I am interested to hear a little more whether or not you, the panelists, have had this experience to try to translate the science into the language of women's human rights.
Thank you very much. I will take one last question because one of our panelists has just arrived. I also would like to give him the opportunity, but let's have your question, and I would like the panelists to note this. Before responding, I would like to give the opportunity to Mayor Older-Simto to address the participants and the panel.
Yeah, I'm from Taiwan, and I'm very impressed by the talk by Mayor Iversen. Yeah, I'm wondering whether other cities in Canada is following the step, your city's step, and make some imitation or mimics. Yeah, such that this your concept can be spread around Canada.
Thank you. I would like panelists to keep their notes, but I would like to take the honor of welcoming Mr. Older-Simto, Mayor of the capital city of Vanuatu, Mayor of Port Vila. He has been among us, probably one of those having the longest distance of travel, and we would like to first of all thank his patience to bear with us, because we have been in the last couple of years, especially after the hurricane hit his city, we were immediately trying to reach him, and then we tried to develop our partnership with his city and leadership, and we want to show the world that ambitious action can be taken at all levels, and the small island states, the cities in the small island states, are part of this global exchange of knowledge and experience, and we're proud that he is following with us in Seoul in ICLEI World Congress. He was, and his peers was also in Quito, and what we are trying to, maybe Mayor Sumto, in that sense, I can try to give the floor. How do you think that when you were part of increasingly engaged in this global processes, how this is helping to face the challenge at your city? How is this helping your dialogues in the national level with your citizens? Being part of this global processes, is it easing your life? And how do you want to also help us to face, to show us the challenges that you have faced in your countries, in your cities, that the global community is aware of these challenges as well. The floor is yours, Mayor.
Thank you. As you already said, we are one of the small island states in the Pacific, and we are affected by many disasters, like cyclone, earthquake, every disaster you can name it in this conference. We have faced. Every year we have our calendar, but in this month, December to March next year, that season we call it the disaster season. Any disaster can affect us, can strike us in any time of now until March next year. So we are affected in the way that we are a small island state. So we are one of the island states that we are prone of disaster. Any kind of disaster can strike us anytime. Like before yesterday, I think we had an earthquake of 7.8 that hit New Zealand, and it will affect also the small island nation around New Zealand and Australia. So it is very important for us to be present here in this conference, and I must acknowledge the presence of ICLEI. ICLEI has made a lot of commitment in our country in building partnership, our partnership with NGOs around like UNDP and ADP, all others. So we acknowledge their commitment to our city. And lately, we just signed a partnership with UNSTR. And we are, with our population, many of them, they don't know about climate change. Because the word is not sounding familiar with them. They just know that on December to March, they must prepare for any disaster. So we can adapt us in any disaster can strike us in any time. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to give a little bit of our brief information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Sumto. It's also particularly important because maybe you are listening that who will host the next COP is a big debate. And I think we will still have this news coming up. But there is an officially proposal that Fiji, another small island country, will host politically, logistically, where it will be hosted, we don't know yet. But this gives also a huge opportunity when Mayor Sumto's presence here, so that when he goes back, he can reach out to the other mayors in his community in the small island states, so that we are still keeping the momentum. And as we have come here in Morocco, we have reached out to local communities. When we have the Fiji as the representative of small islands to be the leader in the climate agenda, the cities of the small island states will also be working with us. They will be welcoming us, and we will try to raise their voices into this agenda. And we hope that we will find the solutions as quick as possible. So I would like to suggest each panelist, and we would probably start with Deborah because there were a couple of points. Maybe we can follow the reverse order. We can start with Deborah, and I can go at the end to Dr. Schellnhuber. Maybe he can also refer, not necessarily the question, as your takeout from this dialogue. But we have to leave the room at 4:30. So 2 minutes each would be an ideal scenario. And Deborah, please, I'd like to start with you.
So the question on transport, building, and industry, those are all uniquely urban activities. And so cities have to address them all. That's the problem with cities. We don't get to cherry pick. We've actually got to do everything at one go. And that's already been acknowledged in the scoping outline of the 1.5 report. To avoid lock-in, and John referred to this, cities are going to be key. You're going to have to turn cities around if you want to avoid lock-in that commits us well beyond 1.5. Just in terms of practical examples, things around transport, the move to automated transport, we were discussing in a prior side event, instead of having vehicles on the road for 2 hours and then storing them for 22, having automated vehicles that run for 22 hours and you only store them for 2 hours is going to be the kind of change you're talking about. I almost cheered John on when he said he thought the most important building material going forward is wood. In fact, we agree with him that throw away the concept of the ideal city. Certainly in Durban, we're beginning to think of functional slums and informal settlements and building houses with alien plants using biomass instead of concrete. Obviously, in terms of energy, closing that loop, so having circular ecologies between various industrial productions. These are all things that cities are going to have to do, which is why the important role of cities talking to each other and actually sharing that information so that we can all learn and leapfrog instead of having to reinvent the wheel a million times over.
Excellent. Mr. Chingfu, maybe we can, if you don't have to, but any concluding remark as the last 1 minute? Yep.
As I mentioned before, the behavior change for the local resident is the most difficult thing we are facing. So we do a lot of effort, try to communicate with the local resident, and we find out the female, the women in the community is a very good channel for us to bring the concept. For example, how the benefit of eco-mobility can bring to the community, and also we ask for their support, and we find the female, the women in the community, they because they deal with the daily life for almost every family. So I think obtain the participants from the woman, the female is very important when we try to promote the eco-mobility concept in our city. So far, that's my remark.
Excellent. Thanks a lot also addressing the question from our colleague from the Women Constituency. May I address them?
Sure. I mean, I think the answer is we need to do all three. The greatest urgency and opportunity to influence is probably transportation in the short term in our context, buildings next, and industries the hardest. But you need to start now, and we have started with regulatory measures and incentives, and with carbon pricing coming to Canada. The incentive framework to make those things shift is coming into place. Really appreciate the question about gender. I actually co-lead our women's initiative in Edmonton along with one of our female councillors, and our citizen panel was gender balanced. That was one of the ways it was balanced in every way that we could demographically, both culturally and by age and by income as well, but it was gender balanced as well. And we saw real value in that, and so we're actually doing an exercise right now looking at how do we apply the gender lens to all policy decisions that we make, including that would include climate mitigation and adaptation decisions that we would make. So we're formally adopting a gender lens as part of policy making. And we have a standing committee that advises City Council, the Women's Advocacy Voice of Edmonton, which is all women from different walks of life who provide policy advice to City Council and have given us extraordinary advice on things that you wouldn't think about necessarily, or that as a man I wouldn't think about, which is how to make our transit system safer and more accessible. And the little stickers that used to say only press in the case of emergency on pain of a fine of $250, which really discouraged people from pressing the button, now say press if you need help, which means if people need help, whether they're women or men, they're more inclined to call for help, and that makes them feel safer on the transit system. And it's a small thing, but if that supports transit usage and that helps us meet our climate goals, then the advice of women has become instrumental. And that's just one small example. In terms of the question about what other cities have done, whether they've copied us, I know different Canadian cities have taken different approaches to public engagement. Vancouver's Greenest City initiative was sort of crowdsourced using online tools to help people make suggestions and rank the suggestions. So there have been different tactics employed in different Canadian cities. If you want to see more about what we did with the University of Alberta, albertaclimatedialogue.ca, or just search for Alberta Climate Dialogue. Would give you all the background information about the methodology and process that people were taken through, and that would be our experience. But I would be happy to share, and if you want to contact me afterwards to get some more political perspective on how it worked, I'd be happy to share that too. But appreciate the questions and thank you for your attention today.
Very briefly, I think we've seen some amazing examples from cities around the world, big, small, north, south, east, west, tackling climate change and working with their stakeholders, also looking at the gender issue. One of the things we recommend, and we've seen some very interesting results, is bringing together science for the lay people, which we do need the scientists to give us more of that, which we can use to develop scenarios in a community context. What we recommend to our local governments is bring people such as Edmonton has done from all walks of life, people who are owning the community and will own the future, that they can brainstorm and develop scenarios that suit their needs and have that lens of climate change on top. Through that, you can develop very interesting scenarios, bringing in your business sector, bringing in your industry, but especially your communities, your NGOs, and looking at it both from a mitigation and adaptation side. If they develop the scenarios with you as local government, they will own it. And then you can move forward very fast and you can scale. Thank you.
Finally. Yeah, so first I have to say I learned a lot today from my colleagues here on the panel. That was wonderful. Deborah, so I'm looking forward to your leadership for the IPCC. I mean, the special report is a unique opportunity, but it's very important. And finally, the IPCC is waking up to the challenge of the cities. So well done. So, Marijke, I learned a lot also regarding the communities that are often more ambitious than the governments of countries. This is also the case in Germany, for example, where the city of Berlin, the city of Munich, they all move forward and raise the bar, actually. So this is really a bottom-up process, self-organized largely, but very promising. The third quick remark, is also referring to where do we overcome the emissions obstacles? Is it transportation? Is it industry? Is it buildings? I just would like to remind everybody that the old model of organizing an entire country by concentric rings around the capital, London is organizing the rest of England. This model is dead, really. It won't work anymore. So you need to break it up, and you will have polycentric structures. And when I could directly tell you what it does for transport, what it does for renewables, for example, how you run a city, if you have enough space actually for tapping the renewable energy. This is a revolution, a looming, right? And the last, talking about revolution, we have to factor in the digital revolution, of course. That is changing everything. So thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much for a fantastic conclusion. It eased my job as well.
Oh, sorry.
It's exactly what I was hoping that you would be able to do it, so that I can now invite all the panelists to stand up for a family photo, and we will leave the room for the next side event. But thank you very much for your interest. It was very, very inspirational that there is a positive future that we can build and enjoy.
Maybe if I am allowed to say, material on the report is outside, so there are able colleagues here who can direct you to that. So if you want to be informed, please take the opportunity. Thanks.
You want us in front of the...
Yeah, this way. Yeah, okay. Good.
So, Deborah, good luck with your work. Yeah, I mean, I will not do the full IPCC cycle again. I did it, and
have to go to the middle of the back.
Very good.
Okay. Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Let me give you